The leader isn't the safest driver in Formula One. They're the most exposed. When a safety car deploys, the cost of a pit stop collapses from 25 seconds to as little as 9 seconds. That single compression has flipped race wins, handed podiums to drivers who never earned them on pace, and decided at least one world championship. Leaders are 1.7 times more likely to lose position under caution than anyone else on the grid. The safety car is Formula One's most broken rule. To understand why, you first need to know what a pit stop actually costs. A pit stop in Formula One is not a single moment. It is a sequence of time penalties stitched together by regulation and physics. The headline figure, 20 to 25 seconds lost under a green flag, gets thrown around as if it is a law of nature. But that number is the sum of 3 distinct segments, each with its own rules and vulnerabilities. First is the entry transit. As soon as a driver peels off the racing line, they hit the pit lane speed limiter. The car crawls down a narrow corridor at 80 kilometers per hour, bleeding seconds while everyone on track is still flat out. At Monaco, that entry can chew up nearly half the total loss before the car even stops. At Monza, the entry is shorter, but the penalty is still real. You are locked into the limiter and unable to defend your position. Then comes the stationary slice, the part that gets all the glory in highlight reels. The tyre change itself is a mechanical ballet, executed in about 2.3 seconds on average. Teams chase sub-2 second stops, but the difference between a record and a routine stop is just tenths of a second. The real damage is done before and after the crew ever touches the car. Finally is the exit transit. Once the tyres are on, the driver is still a hostage to the pit lane speed limit. Every meter from the box to the pit exit is another second lost to rivals flying down the main straight. On a typical circuit, the exit can account for nearly a third of the total loss. Add it all up, and the 20 to 25 second penalty is not some abstract punishment. It is the sum of enforced slowness, mechanical minimums, and track-specific geometry. And that number is not fixed. It bends and breaks depending on where you are. Monaco punishes with a 23-second delta, while Monza barely cracks 12 seconds. The illusion of a universal pit stop cost is the first myth the safety car shatters. Every second in the pit lane is a calculated risk, and every segment is a lever teams can exploit or be destroyed by when the race goes yellow. Fans love to throw around a single pit lane time, 12, maybe 15 seconds, as if it is gospel. But the stopwatch does not care about averages, and the track certainly does not. Silverstone, for example, spits in the face of that comfort zone. The green flag pit loss there clocks in at 16.9 seconds, not the tidy 12 to 15 seconds most people expect. Why? Geometry. The pit lane at Silverstone stretches over 1 kilometer, with a speed limit that turns a full throttle racer into a commuter. That entry and exit, crawling at 80 kilometers an hour, bleeds seconds while rivals are flying down the straight. The penalty is not just the tyre change, it is every meter spent off the racing line, every corner that turns the pit lane into a slow-motion detour. Contrast that with Monza, where the pit lane is brutally short and the loss barely cracks 12 seconds. At Monaco, the entry is so tight and the pit lane so long that drivers hand over nearly 23 seconds for a stop. The numbers swing wildly, circuit to circuit. Yet the safety car rule is blind to these differences. It is a blunt instrument applied identically everywhere. That is where the chaos begins. When the field bunches up under caution, when the pit loss collapses, it does not do so evenly. A cheap stop at Silverstone is not the same as a cheap stop at Baku. The geometry sets the trap, and the rule springs it. If you think strategy is just about tyre wear and track position, you are missing the hidden math. Every team knows the real pit loss for every circuit and every lap. They model when a safety car could flip the grid, not by luck, but by exploiting the exact time compression each layout creates. The so-called fairness of the safety car is an illusion, shattered by the stopwatch and the shape of the track. A 12-second gap once meant safety. Build the lead, control the pace, pit on your terms. But a safety car erases that comfort in an instant. The numbers tell the story. Under green flag, a pit stop costs between 20 and 25 seconds at most tracks. Monaco's pit lane demands nearly 23 seconds, Monza just over 12 seconds. But when the safety car appears, the field slows to nearly half speed, 45 to 55% of normal racing pace, while the pit lane speed limit never changes. Suddenly, the pit delta collapses to just 9 to 12 seconds. That's not a minor adjustment. That's a 10-second window, wide open for anyone willing to risk it. The data is clear. FIA timing from 2017 to 2023 shows Silverstone's green flag pit loss at 16.9 seconds, but only 9.6 seconds under safety car. Monaco's 22.8-second penalty drops to 10.4 seconds. Spa, Yas Marina, Baku, everywhere, the same pattern. The reduction is not luck, it is physics. The field crawls, but the pit lane does not. The time that should protect the leader is gone. The stopwatch ignores qualifying pace and perfect in laps. It only cares about delta. In real terms, a leader with a 15-second cushion is suddenly exposed. The gap shrinks by nearly 10 seconds, leaving barely enough margin to pit and rejoin ahead. Rivals just outside the pit window now get a cheap stop, fresh tires, minimal penalty, sometimes even track position. The numbers are ruthless. A 54% reduction at Monaco, 43% at Silverstone, 36% at Yas Marina. The effect is universal. The safety car doesn't just neutralize the race, it rewrites the script. Strategists watch timing screens, not hoping for luck but running simulations, calculating when a safety car could flip everything. Every pit window, every tire call, every hesitation is filtered through the knowledge that a 10-second gap can vanish in a heartbeat. The leader's advantage is never secure. The safety car turns comfort into chaos. Supposedly, the leader is protected. Supposedly, a 15-second gap is the fortress every driver dreams of. But the safety car doesn't care about comfort or dominance. It's a wrecking ball, swinging through the math and smashing every illusion of security at the front. The numbers are brutal. Since 2017, frontrunners are 1.7 times more likely to lose positions when a safety car appears than anyone else in the field. Not because of bad luck, not because of a botched pit stop, but because the rule is engineered to erase their advantage in an instant. Here is the contradiction. The leader spends lap after lap building a cushion, balancing tire wear, controlling the pace, and executing perfect in laps. Then the safety car comes out, and that hard-earned margin is chopped in half. The pit delta, the time lost in a stop, collapses from 20 to 25 seconds to 9 to 12. That is not a minor adjustment. That is a demolition. Suddenly, the leader's so-called safe window is a trap. Rivals who were outside the pit window are now inside it, queuing up for cheap stops. The leader faces a no-win scenario: pit and risk track position, or stay out and risk being eaten alive by cars on fresher tires. This is not just about time, it is psychological warfare. Teams behind the leader are waiting for this exact moment, running Monte Carlo simulations before the race, feeding in the historic 66% safety car deployment rate and calculating the lap where a cheap stop becomes inevitable. The leader's strategists are forced into split-second decisions, knowing that a single hesitation can turn a dominant race into a loss. Tire age, pit lane traffic, and the sudden collapse of the gap all converge. The stopwatch does not care who is leading, it only cares about delta. The safety car does not neutralize the race, it rewrites it, and it does so with mathematical precision. The myth of leader safety is just that, a myth shattered by the data. In Formula One, the front runner is not protected. They are exposed, targeted, and statistically first in line to lose. Singapore, 2018. The numbers say Vettel is chasing Hamilton, but the real contest is invisible. Who can weaponize the safety car window first? On lap 31, Vettel dives in for fresh tyres. The pit delta is brutal, 22.4 seconds lost, nearly an entire straight's worth of punishment. 2 laps later, chaos erupts at turn 4. The safety car is deployed. Instantly, the math changes. The field slows to a crawl, the pit lane speed limit stays the same, and the loss for anyone pitting collapses to just 11 seconds. That is a savings of more than 10 seconds, carved out of thin air. Mercedes, caught on the wrong side of the calculation, leaves Hamilton out, trusting in tyre life and old assumptions about track position. Vettel, who pitted just before the window, emerges with a razor-thin margin, barely half a second ahead when the safety car peels off. The undercut, which should have been a slow burn, becomes a sledgehammer. The so-called luck is nothing of the sort. Every strategist in the paddock models this scenario before the lights go out. The safety car does not just shuffle the deck, it hands out wild cards to anyone behind the leader. Fast forward to Monza, 2020. The narrative flips. Magnussen's retirement triggers a virtual safety car, and the pit lane closes. Hamilton, leading by a comfortable margin, dives in anyway, only to be hit with a stop-go penalty. The numbers are unforgiving. What should have been a routine stop now costs him 30 seconds and any hope of victory. Meanwhile, Pierre Gasly, buried in the midfield, times his stop perfectly under the virtual safety car. The pit loss that would have buried him under green flag 20 seconds at Monza shrinks to -6 seconds. Gasly leaps the field as the red flag resets the order, and when the race restarts, he is on fresh tyres with clean air. He wins, not because of a miracle, but because the rulebook rewards those out of position when the chaos hits. The system does not care about dominance. It cares about timing, about who is poised to exploit the pit loss collapse when the moment comes. These are not flukes. They are engineered reversals. The safety car and virtual safety car do not just compress gaps, they erase the logic of pace, undercut, and tyre management. They turn the leader's hard work into a liability and hand the initiative to anyone ready to gamble. If you still think this is about luck, you are missing the only numbers that matter. Abu Dhabi, 2021. The world's watching, the title hanging on a thread, and every armchair strategist is screaming about luck. But the numbers are merciless. Latifi crashes, the safety car is called, and the time-cost model for pit stops doesn't just bend, it snaps. Verstappen, second on the road, gets the call. The pit delta at Yas Marina under green is about 21 seconds. Under a safety car, it is about 10 seconds. That's an 11-second swing, engineered not by fate, but by the rulebook. Verstappen dives in, bolts on softs, and rejoins just 0.8 seconds behind Hamilton. The so-called safe gap is vaporized. Hamilton, left on worn mediums, is now a sitting duck. The advantage of track position erased by a regulation, not by a mistake. This is not some one-off fluke. The same principle locks down races where overtaking is not just hard, it is almost impossible. Monaco, 2022. Leclerc leads, the pit window is tight, and a virtual safety car drops the pit loss from 22.8 seconds to just over 15 seconds. Ferrari pulls the trigger. Leclerc gets a stop that costs him only 0.2 seconds relative to the field. On a circuit where a 0.2 cushion is as good as a concrete wall, that is the difference between a win and a parade lap. The field cannot touch him. The math has spoken. Forget the myth that the safety car is a coin flip. Teams run Monte Carlo simulations, feeding in the historic 66% deployment rate, the lap-by-lap probability, and the exact moment when a cheap stop becomes inevitable. The leader's margin is never safe. Verstappen's last gasp title, Leclerc's untouchable Monaco, these are not accidents. They are the logical endpoint of a system that rewards those behind, punishes pace, and turns the timing of a yellow flag into the most powerful move in Formula One. Every time the safety car rolls, it is not luck, it is leverage, and the numbers are loaded. The phrase cheap stop gets thrown around as if it is a trick of fortune, a yellow flag, a lucky break, a pit window falling into your lap. But the numbers say otherwise. Under a virtual safety car, the time lost in the pit lane does not just shrink, it flips. The pit delta, which normally hovers around 20 to 25 seconds, can collapse by 6 to 8 seconds compared to a green flag. That is not a rounding error, that is a tactical weapon. Suddenly, a driver who would have emerged buried in traffic leaps ahead of rivals who stayed out, all because the rest of the field is crawling at 60% race pace, while the pit lane penalty stays fixed. Monte Carlo simulations run by every top team show that in a typical race, the odds of a virtual safety car producing a cheap stop opportunity are as high as 85% if you are bold enough to pull the trigger. Compare that to a measly 58% success rate when you attempt to double stack under green. Why? Because the Q penalty, the time the second car loses waiting for the first, is nearly erased when the field is trundling behind the safety car. Under caution, the second car in a double stack might lose a single second, maybe 2 instead of 3 or 4. The calculus changes. 2 cars serviced, both likely to hold their position. The risk profile inverted. This is not about luck. It is about engineering the pit window, running the numbers, and knowing when the system hands you levers instead of dice. The cheap stop and the double stack are not desperate moves, they are the logical play when the stopwatch, the pit lane, and the reduced speed delta all line up. The real battle is not on the racing line, it is in the timing screens, where a 6-second swing can erase a season's worth of pace. The teams that win are the ones who treat these moments not as gifts, but as probabilities they have been waiting to cash in. Teams don't leave safety car windows to chance. Every major outfit, Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, feeds the historic numbers into Monte Carlo engines before a wheel turns. These are not back-of-the-envelope guesses. They are 10,000 run simulations, each one rolling the dice on when and how the race will break. The results are blunt. Since 2017, 60 to 70% of races have at least one full safety car. Add another 0.9 virtual safety cars per race, and the odds of a caution window are baked into the DNA of every Grand Prix. Street circuits like Baku and Singapore push those odds above 80%. The myth of a lucky safety car dies in the spreadsheet. Strategists like Hannah Schmitz, James Vowles, and Ruth Buscombe do not pray for fortune. They engineer it. Their models spit out probability matrices, mapping every lap to the likelihood of a cheap stop, a double stack, or a leader's nightmare. The numbers are merciless. A single safety car can cut the pit loss by half, flipping a 15-second fortress into a house of cards. The leader's gap, once a hard-earned shield, becomes a liability the moment the simulation flashes yellow, and the next era will only sharpen the knife. The 2026 rules strip out DRS. No more push-button overtakes, no more easy passes down the straight. Overtaking will hinge on tire delta and track position, both of which the safety car manipulates in real time. The models are already adapting. Projected overtakes drop by 15%, while the value of a cheap stop soars. When the pit loss collapses from 24 seconds to 10 seconds at Monaco, or from 17 seconds to 9 seconds at Silverstone, the race is not just compressed, it is rewritten. The strategist's screen becomes the real battleground, and the safety car's probability curve is the most dangerous weapon on it. In the world that is coming, the luck excuse will not survive. The numbers make the rules, and the rules are about to get even more brutal. A system that can erase a 15-second lead in 9 seconds is not random. It is engineered chaos. This is not about luck or racecraft. It is about a rule that turns dominance into disadvantage by design. As Formula One heads toward 2026, with fewer overtakes and even tighter margins, the question is not who gets lucky. It is who survives the algorithm. Drop your verdict below. Does the rule need rewriting? Because in Formula One, the real race isn't always on track. Subscribe if you want to understand what actually decides it.